Hello there and welcome back to my channel. I've got a question for you. Do you use jam jars as emergency vases? I do. I think they look really great, especially when you've got really short stemmed flowers which are too small for any other container. I like putting them on my kitchen windowsill so I can enjoy them when I'm washing up. But perhaps you might want to take the jam jar up another level and make it a little bit more decorative. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to use some garden twine and a glue gun to make a decorative cuff, and nobody will ever know that your jam jar was hidden inside this lovely rustic looking container. For this DIY, I'm using a really heavy duty garden twine. You'll need some jam jars. I found that working with the straight sided jars worked best. You'll also need your hot glue gun. This DIY is about making a removable cuff for your jam jars. I find that if you stick your twine direct to the jar, it just makes keeping your jar clean really difficult. And if you don't have a clean container for your flowers, you will find they won't last quite so long as you wanted them to. You see me here putting a dab of glue on the end of the piece of twine, and then I'm coiling it around in my hands, adding glue as I go so it all holds in place, and I'm trying to get a circular disc that fits round the bottom of my jam jar. What I mean by that is it needs to fit around the base of the jam jar, almost like you're creating a little coaster. You need to be really careful here you don't burn your fingers. The glue gun is really hot and this is a real sort of hands-on part of the DIY. Just keep continuing round, and you can see here I've got a coil and I'm holding up to the base of my jam jar to see how much bigger I need to make it. So I suggest you make it marginally bigger than the base of your jar, just so you can add your jar in and out of the cuff really easily. Otherwise you'll find it will get stuck and you won't be able to remove it. You'll need to check the sizing every so often. So here I think I probably need to do one more round before I start building up the sides of the cuff. The trick here is to keep measuring up against the base of your jam jar, just so you know the sizing is exactly right. So I've completed the base now, and you see me doing one final measure up. I need to make sure that I've got a coil of string that goes around the outer edge of the base in order that I can start building up the sides as well. I've used a straight-sided jar here so I can use it as a mould to work around. So I'm not actually gluing my twine to the jam jar itself, because I want this cuff to be removable so that I can keep my jam jar scrupulously clean. So as you know, when you've got fresh flowers, you need to make sure they're in clean water in a clean container so your flowers aren't dying faster than you really want them to. So it's a bit cumbersome at the moment because I'm having to hold my string around the jar whilst gluing at the same time. But at all crafting projects, you just need to go slowly and carefully, making sure you don't add on too much glue. And you can see here that I lay my jam jar down on a folded up tea towel just to stop it rolling around. It is much easier working on a firm base, so I'm running probably 3 or 4 centimetres of glue round at a time and trying to keep it on the top edge of the twine so it doesn't ooze out between the lines of string, and then pushing them down to dry as I go around. So you can see here I've got the base with my first ring of the string going round, and then where you start off the string you then layer up, so it's one continuous coil going round and round the jam jar. It doesn't take too long to do when you're working by yourself, but conscious of you watching the video, I'm going to speed up this next section. You can see exactly what I'm going to do. Take the string from the base right the way up to the top. I am going to add in some decorative handles though, so I'll stop the film at that point and talk you through exactly what I'm doing. Once my twine cuff becomes more stable, sometimes I work with the jam jar taken out of the middle, and sometimes I put it back in again. You don't want the sides of your jar, your cuff, going a bit wavy. You need to make sure you can easily take the jam jar in and out for washing purposes. I'm just on the last few rounds now, and then I'm going to add in a couple of handles just for a decorative twist. But of course, if you want to keep your cuff nice and straight and streamlined, you just continue straight to the top. But I've decided to add in some little loopy handles. They won't sit totally straight because of the nature of the twine. So you can see here, I've glued a length and then I skip a bit. So I've probably got a twist of about 8 to 10 centimetres looping around the handle, and leaving a gap between the two handles of about 3 centimetres or so. And at this point, you really do need to make sure your glue has dried before you move on. Otherwise, your handle will slip out of place. And then you go round, continue your gluing to the other side of the jar, and then you need to look across and match the placement of your handles. So don't glue too far around the jar. So take the string round to the edge and then mirror what you did on the other side by pulling out the rope the same distance the other side and then gluing it back down. And to secure my handles in place, you'll see me after I've finished doing the handle detail, is I then take the twine back around the top of the jam jar. So these handles are probably set down about 3 reels of string twine before I actually get to the top of the jar. So I've put my handles in just where the screw top starts on my jar, but then I continue onwards with with circling round, coiling around the twine until I reach the top of the jar. And I want really to hide the jam jar, so that if you were to see this on the side, you would just think it was a lovely rustic container rather than a jam jar with a bit of string around the edge. So here I am adding in the top rows of the twine, and as I work my way around that screw top detail, I don't take the string straight the way up. You of course might want to, but I'm just conscious of the fact I need to get my fingers into the little cuff to remove the jam jar. So I've let my neck of my cuff loosen out a little bit. And then when you're happy with the height of your cuff, take your scissors and trim off and then glue that end piece securely in place so you can't see it where it is and you don't want it working loose. So just be really, really secure with that last bit of gluing. And there is the finished cuff. So I'm rather pleased with the way it turned out. I will say though that as the glue dried, it did dry slightly milky in colour and was a tiny bit obvious, but I guess if you've got clear glue, your workmanship will look a little bit better than mine. So these are my finished twine cuffs, which are really fun to make. So fun, in fact, that I made 2 of them. And the second one, as if all these DIY crafting projects, is much easier to do because you understand the technique that you're doing. And my goal here was to have the cuffs with quite a loose fit around the jam jars so that I could remove them for cleaning. And you can see here that one of them is slightly straighter than the other. But, you know, whether that's by accident or design is entirely up to you. I was slightly concerned though about the amount of glue I had on the first one that was oozing out at the sides. So what I'm going to do is to cover that up with a little bit of paint and have one with a paint trim and the other one left in a slightly more rustic form. So what you see me doing here is pouring out some acrylic paint onto a saucer, taking my brush and using a dry brushing technique, i.e. one that isn't soaking wet with paint, and just giving it the lightest of touches around the edges. So this goes on really well and is really great at disguising those glue spills. So continue coating the paint all the way around the container, and I did a little bit in the inside edge too. So here are my cups side by side. You know, which do you prefer? Do you like the paint finish or do you like it in the natural state? You'll have to let me know in the comments below. What I decided to do next was to take my cuff up a level, and it's quite fashionable at the moment to have quite heavily dipped paint effects at the bottom of baskets and containers. So that's what I'm doing here, actually doing a proper wet brush technique and following the lines of the string coils, doing as solid as I can strip of white around the bottom. So I've got a nice bit of solid colour at the bottom and then the lighter touch white paint reaching up to the top of the cuff. I was really pleased with the way this paint detail worked out. I really like the contrast between the solid stripe at the bottom and the lighter, finer colouring towards the top, and also again the contrast between the painted cuff and the one that is just in its natural rustic state. Once you've made the string covers or cuffs for your jam jars, you can get creative with your flowers. So I filled a couple of jam jars up here and I'll slide them into the little string cuffs. I like to fill my jam jars with something bushy to begin with, and it'll help support the other flowers. I've got some sedum here, which is just beginning to come out into flower. Recut the ends and get arranging. And then for a bit of contrast and to fill up these gaps, I've got some fennel. This has got a fabulous scent. The yellow flowers have just gone over, but the seeds are starting to develop. I'm going to trim off that side shoot, and that way I get 2 stems. And the same here as well. Trim off the side, group them together, and then recut. See now, I've got both jam jars filled with a lovely cushion, and I can arrange my other flowers through that. These are Rebecca, they look like mini sunflowers, so I do exactly the same things. Trim their ends, peel off any leaves that should be inside the water, and add them to my little vase. A touch of pink, Japanese anemone. And a little bit of hydrangea. This one needs trimming down. It's got some dead shoots inside. I'll get rid of those. I want it to look as perfect as possible. And a touch of green. This is choisia for the other vase. And we have 2 simple arrangements. And to finish off my arrangements, I'm going to attach this little label, Flowers from You to Me. I've printed this off from my website. It's one of 8 you can buy, which have got an autumn theme to them. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time. But before you go, you'll have to let me know whether you preferred the rustic style container or the one with a little bit of a paint trim to it. That's all from me for now, and I'll see you next time.